welcome back to Balancing Act. We're back again here today with Michon Henegar and Linda Wilson. I'm Sam McEwen. Thanks for listening in to Balancing Act. And Michon, we left off with a good conversation, but I wanted to start back up with the lesson, Teams Fulfill Dreams. Could you dive into that a little bit more for us?
Absolutely. So Teams Fulfill Dreams is part of our youth initiative. And that one's really focused on middle school, high school, or could even be college and career age. And that lesson right there, what it's going to talk about is not just coming up with a dream. Okay, we want to have a dream. And we talked about in the last time that we met that we really want any young person that we're working with, we say to them, what are 3 different things that you're dreaming of doing? Because we want to get those things on paper. We want them to start thinking about it. And then the next part is once we get that on paper, we want to get to that part of teamwork, because anything that I do is going to be more valuable when I'm working with others. Now, I say it's kind of cliche to say we are better together, but it's true. I mean, I think you both could agree with that. We are better together. So now I want you to think about any dream that a student may have. I mean, someone could say, well, matter of fact, I used this one in one of my last, the time we met, we talked about, I had a student who wanted to be an ophthalmologist. And so what are some different things that student needs to do if he really thinks that he wants to be an ophthalmologist? Well, he probably needs to go and spend a day with an ophthalmologist, right? And just see what they're doing, or maybe start reading some different books. And then I think too, I'm going to give you another strategy that's just practical, because often all they can think of is when I'm an ophthalmologist. They can't think anything past that. But I want to tell them, remember, you also want to put as much money as you can towards your degree right now. So that means you might want to go get a job at Chick-fil-A.
Right.
How is that going to help you later on? Like, what strategy is that? Well, I'm going to be working with people, and you're going to be working with people in what you do. And so we want them to think of multiple strategies that we know of, like as adults, right? But these young people, they don't think that way. They just think, this is what I want to do. I'm going to go to school. Boom, that's what's going to happen. And it's interesting, Sam and Linda, that a lot of people now, like they just pay for their children to go to college, and they don't work at all until they actually try to go and apply for their first job.
Yeah.
And that's something that we're seeing more and more, because the parents feel like that would be hard for them. But I have to say, I think it's a strategy to help them learn like what it's like to be in the workforce, what it's like to get up early, to maybe push your body a little bit, even when you're tired, right? Pushing through things, being resilient. And so really helping them explore different things from multifaceted directions. Okay. So everything from like finances to what it would actually look like in the career. What are the things I can do to increase knowledge? All of the pieces of the puzzle, we're wanting to put it together to say, you know what, these are the things that I'm going to need. Like I might need a mentor. That's going to be one of my pieces to my team. I need to go and find someone that I can shadow. That's someone that's part of my team. Could even be the college counselor, right? All of those different pieces are going to come together. But where we come into play through the youth initiative is, how nice is it just to sit and have a rich conversation with someone who can kind of guide you through the process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's where it's powerful that we all can step in and we can help in that way.
And with a wide variety and range of different backgrounds.
Mm-hmm.
So, you may have a person who has a music background and the kid wants to go into technology. Well, there's a lot of that will mesh, and there's a lot of questions that can be asked, but I really liked your in the last session, you talked about, trying to get them to talk about 2 or 3 things that they would like to do. I think that's, it opens up their minds.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that too. And I think too, you can even take it a step further and say to them, do you think that's going to be something that's going to generate income for you? Or is that a hobby? Yes. And so that's a question you can get further down the road. Now, I wouldn't ask that in the beginning. And the reason is the minute we ask it too early and they haven't explored, like you were talking about, Linda, and spending time with it, now my brain shuts down. Like, you don't believe in me. You don't think I can do it. And so what we're wanting to say is like, okay, I mean, that's great. Go ahead and write that down. But as you're starting to work through it and you get to that process of where we say teams fulfill dreams, what are the resources that I need? Who are the people that I need? And we start looking at it, then I can start asking like, well, what do you think? Do you think that this might be more of a hobby, or are you going to generate income with this? Because a hobby is important too, because it's going to help you have that free time to do the things you really love to so that you can go and do this other job where you generate the income.
Right. And so often we're pushing our kids and our grandkids and people we're interacting with, and what are you going to do right out of what are you doing after high school? Or are you going to college? What are you going to? And we're pushing them to make that decision without thinking through, like you're talking about, and sitting and writing down all the various things. And so then what's the next natural step? You talked earlier in the first part about working with you worked with a hospital for people who wanted to go into the medical field, and preparing that for kids to let them, because my oldest daughter wanted to be a nurse. Well, she wanted to be a nurse because my cousin was a nurse, my mom was a nurse, and she grew up around it. Okay, until she got to nursing school.
Oh boy.
And she worked her way through high school as a CNA. She was the youngest CNA in South Dakota. Okay. So it wasn't like she didn't have exposure, but once she got into exactly what it was she was going to have, she didn't want to have anything to do with it. And now she's a professor of law. so quite a switch. So, but we hadn't talked through like that. And I look back on this, like I never talked, I never talked to the kids like that, I talked to them about their dreams, what they wanted to do, and I always encourage them. But to take it this direction, I think is so valuable.
And I think it helps for them to know that by having more than one option, one of the things we kind of don't talk to young kids about is that as you get older, what you want to do could change. I've reinvented myself, 3-4 times easily.
Yep.
And that's okay. It doesn't take away from what they wanted to do when they were younger. Mm-hmm. And they can start off in that. But as you go through, maybe the schooling isn't what you want, or maybe it isn't what you thought it was going to be, or maybe you've done it for 10 years and that was great. Now what else can I do? Some of that depends on their personality. They may like change. A lot of those kind of choices aren't forever choices. So that should give them a little bit more freedom and flexibility to dream, right?
I think that's important. We want them to be there, right? We want them to dream. But I think one thing, and a lot of people are probably going to find even working with youth, this seems to be one of the common responses. When I say to them, well, what do you want to do when you grow up? I don't know.
Yeah.
And so that isn't very helpful either. I think we've also seen that kind of change like in our society. So I'm going to give you a quick little strategy of something you can do when they get to that point, and then kind of loop it back into, Linda, what you said, is write down several things. If you have a grandchild, a child you're working with, a family that you're coaching, and maybe the family you're coaching, they're concerned because the child is, like 17 or 18. So they're like a young person getting ready to graduate and they don't know what to do. Well, what I do is I write down like several things. I'm like, you could do technology. There are a lot of people that make great money as like, just doing things like plumbers and electricians. And I might make that a group. And then I'm like, do you like to cook? I put down a chef. Well, you've been around your teachers a long time. You think you might like to do what your teacher does. Okay, put teacher down. Office work. And I put down like 10 different things. And I just say to them, if today was the day that you had to pick the job you had to do, circle your first choice. And they just go and they circle it. Okay. Because now I've kind of like, I've pushed my brain into a space to say, I have to think about it right now. Mm-hmm. I think sometimes the brain's just so shut off that we're like, I don't really care. Then I say to them, okay, so They just said that job's not available. Okay, go circle job number 2, like second thing you would do. And so then they circle, maybe they circled technology first. So they're like, well, I mean, like a plumber or electrician. I think maybe an electrician. Okay, great. Go ahead and circle that. And then I just say to them, okay, that job's not available either. What I'm teaching them is a little bit of resilience, but also I'm teaching them like to think into it. And then I say, well, what else would be interesting to you? Anything else that's like, I'll look at my list. Now, I remember I have a lot of things on the list, but they could be like, well, I do like helping my mom cook. Maybe I could like be a chef. Okay, that sounds great. That's open for today. And you're going to do that job. And so I'm just trying to take the brain kind of like brainstorming and thinking. But then I can use that list later on, Linda, to go back and be like, you know what? Just because you became a chef today doesn't mean that you can't do that and go back tomorrow and be an electrician. Right. So what I've done is I've left this like very open playing field instead of saying, okay, well, I guess you're going to be a chef your whole life. Right. So go take all the culinary classes and that's it. No, I'm leaving it very open, like this very open playing field for them. Yeah. And so I think what you shared is super important too, that we're guiding and we're leading and we let them know, like, maybe what I did for the first 10 years of my life is not what I'm going to do forever.
Right.
I think that's important.
Yeah, I think another program out there that I've seen a lot of places, and the reason it's top of mind right now is we're starting it down at the port, and that's internships. We have, I think we're interviewing 15 high school students who have expressed a desire in the travel industry. Well, what we do is not the glamorous part of the travel industry. I think they all think that they're coming down to work on a cruise ship. That's not what's going to happen. But to be able to see some of the inner workings, it's the business side of it. It's the getting the people on the ship. It's the people who come in and don't have the right documentation. And you got to tell them this is what you got to get or you're not going. And it's that type of thing. So to see something like that. And my grandson that just came here from Ukraine wants to go into cybersecurity. Well, he graduates here in another couple of weeks. And he's been working all year and finally found an internship. And so we'll see if he likes it. Right.
Right. I think those internships, Sam, are so incredibly important for our students and our kids. I mean, I couldn't shout that loud enough from the tallest mountain.
Yeah.
I had all of my students doing internships as a high school principal that I could. But that meant that I had to work on my side to contact the attorneys and contact people that have different kinds of businesses to say, would you have a student come and work with you? Can they shadow you for a day? Would you do a 6-week internship, a 12-week internship? The hospital turned out to be great because they would let the students come year round. And so in the summer, a lot of the kids would go and they would spend their summer volunteering at the hospital. That volunteership, it actually helped them get to the place where they had a paid internship. Right. Yeah. So I think too, when students can understand that, it makes a big difference.
Right. Yeah. And internships like that, and medical field is notorious for non-paid internships, just notorious. But to work into even a volunteer position where you have to be there at 8 o'clock in the morning, so that's when your shift starts, and you don't take the summer off. I saw a little comical thing, and the girl said, well, it's June 30th, and what are you guys doing for the summer? Well, we're coming to work on Monday morning. What do you mean you don't get the summer off? Because that's what they've had, all through. And so, but I think that the more we can encourage our young people to get those part-time jobs and to be accountable and get away from the screen, and get out in society.
I think that's crucial. Another little thing that I was just thinking of as you were even talking is when we're trying to get them into those internships or start thinking of the things that they need from a team, right? Because I can't become a nurse all by myself. I can't do that. Or a travel agent. I really can't do that by myself or whatever it may be. Well, what we want to do is we want them to start thinking first what they think they need.
Mhm.
So then I do what we call like a side by side. Then I say to them, well, when I was a teacher, I really needed some extra money to pay for my degree. And then I'm like, do you think that might be important for you? I already know the answer, right? But what I'm trying to do is use my story side by their story to kind of spur on conversation.
Mhm.
And so when we do that, then students feel more ownership to it.
Mhm.
Like, oh, that was my idea. Now, are we also going to have to kind of give them some of that information? Of course, because they're learning and they're growing and moving.
Mhm. Yeah. So, how would you guide a student that wants to go to college, but they're not really sure? They've got the hopes and the dreams, and they're being pretty much either the parents are going to pay for the whole thing, or they're being pushed to do all the student loans. What's your thought process there?
For me, I am not a big advocate of the student loans. I've seen that hurt a lot of our kids to the point that they can't ever get out of the student loans that they owe back.
Right.
I'm a big proponent of teaching them from ninth grade on to get as many scholarships as possible. So one thing I say to students, and this is just speaking primarily to the student loan piece, is I say to them, if I gave you $100,000 today, cash in your hand, what if, and then you were driving down the street, would you open the window and just let it fly by and fly away? And of course, they're like, of course not. Like, I would never do that. And I said, that's what you do every time you don't turn in a paper, you don't do your best. And I use that as an illustration for them to let them know that that's your scholarship money, that the first day of ninth grade, it's really in your hand. But
Right.
you're going to get to choose what happens if you're going to hold on to it or not. A lot of students that I've worked with, they get full ride scholarships, or they owe very little.
Mhm.
They can actually do a student work program to pay for it, or they have a very small loan coming out of it.
Mhm.
If not, I feel like it's just like it's like heavy luggage you're carrying along for a very long time.
Yeah.
The second piece, like if a parent says, well, they're just going to pay for all of the college, and the kid's kind of like, I don't even know what I'm going to do, but I'm just going to college because my parents said that they would pay for it.
Mhm.
I think having a conversation with them saying, okay, so let's look how much this is going to cost. What do you think would be the best way to use this money to benefit you 4 years later? Because all they're thinking right now is my parents' money, whatever, I'll go to school, it doesn't matter. But I'm
Right.
like, hey, hold on a minute, pause a minute. You have this money, and it's either going to benefit you in 4 years, or you're going to come out with like a general ed degree in 4 years that, like, what do you do with that?
Right. Right.
I can't tell you how many kids have come out with a psychology degree because they're all going to help someone. But a 4-year psychology degree won't do you any good.
Right.
Really.
Right.
Like you've got to go back and get that master's and doctorate.
Right.
And so I think helping them think, Sam, think it through to say, my parents are going to pay this much money. What is my end goal? So that when I graduate 4 years later, that it's going to be something that I'm going to be like, okay, now look at the steps I can take.
Right. Right.
And that only comes through conversation, helping them pause. And that's where you have to build to that connection with kids where they're going to listen to you.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. I like the way you think.
Is there still a benefit to a gap year?
I think you're going to see research going both ways, Linda, on that gap year, because often what happens is my brain gets into a space like, well, I don't know if I even want to go back and hop back into school. And now I have to get my brain back into writing papers again, thinking about math again, because you think about college in the very beginning years, it's almost kind of like a repeat of high school. You've got to go in and take those first 2 English classes. You're
Get the general stuff out of the way. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they don't really even need to know what exactly they want to do to start.
Right.
Okay.
I even recommend if they're going to do they want to take a gap year, I'm like, how about instead of doing like a full gap year, you take at least 1 to 2 classes from a community college. If you could take it online, and then do like your your job or whatever you're doing. So it keeps them at least in that space of working on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Keeps their head in the game that way.
Yeah, I've seen it work both ways, you know, and yeah, that I can see where the research would go either or. Michon, this has been very enlightening. That your course has got to be very worthwhile for people to jump in, and I would encourage everybody in the empowered living community that's listening and that has listened in on the Saturday trainings and everything to jump into this next generation, giving back to the next generation, the kids on your street. You just don't know what kind of impact you're going to have long range. You just don't know. I look back at some of the conversations that I had as a teenager were the most enlightening with some of the older people in my life. I had a grandfather that really, really played into us and talked about future, talked about life. And if we listen to our young people, we can have an impact. And I think your program is just phenomenal. I really expect great things out of this. I want to thank you so much for coming on to Balancing Act. This fascinates me to no end. I really enjoy what you're doing here. Linda, do you have any last thoughts to add?
I'm just excited to be participating in June and reaching out to my peeps now who I want to work with their kids and see what I can get rolling. But thank you, Michon. Thank you for all the work that you do.
Thank you.
It's amazing what you and your son and your family are doing, and it's the kind of program our youth need.
Yes.
I think it's been difficult times for a long time as far as education goes, depending on where you live and what your resources are. And I think this is a very easy step as a next step to how to help the kids and how to help them build their future with confidence, because this gives them the confidence in themselves to do that. And I'm really excited about that.
I so agree with you, Linda. Thank you so much for having me on, you and Sam. And we're just here to help that next generation succeed.
Yes, absolutely. So this has been Balancing Act with Michon Henegar, Journey of Action. You'll find in the recording, in the show notes and everything, you'll find links to get a hold of her, to reach out to her, to get more information, or to reach out to Linda or I. Thank you so much for listening to Balancing Act. Live intentionally, be very blessed, my friends.